In a galaxy far, far away, we often look at two extreme sides of the Force when looking at the Jedi and the Sith. Well, we know that the Jedi are known to rely on the light side of the Force, whereas the Sith obtain their power through the dark side. And while that may be true, there are still other Force wielders that aren't necessarily Jedi or Sith. And in today's video, I'm going to be going over the key differences between a Dark Jedi and a Sith Lord.
I think Chancellor Palpatine is a Sith Lord.
A Sith Lord?
Yes, the one we've been looking for.
How do you know this?
Well, Mace Windu, there are a couple of key differences between Dark Jedi and Sith. And first off, I just want to preface this by making a clear distinction. A Dark Jedi or a Dark Side Force user does not automatically make them a Sith Lord. To commit to becoming a Sith Lord, you're not just committing to using the dark side in quote-unquote evil ways. You're joining something larger. You're committing to a religion. You're committing to the Sith code, which reads as, "Peace is a lie. There is only passion. Through passion I gain strength. Through strength I gain power. Through power I gain victory. Through victory my chains are broken. The Force shall free me." And while Sith were not always the best at, say, teamwork, with pre-Banite Sith often killing each other for control of the mantle of Dark Lord of the Sith, they still ultimately work together, and usually the Sith Order's goal is, galactic conquest of the galaxy, right?
Once more, the Sith will rule the galaxy.
Whereas a Dark Jedi's goals are much simpler. A Dark Jedi doesn't follow a code. They make their own rules. In the final book of the Darth Bane trilogy, Dynasty of Evil, there's a great quote to explain the differences between Dark Jedi and Sith, coming from Jedi Master Abba. The quote reads, "A Dark Jedi, on the other hand, has much smaller ambitions. He or she thinks only of himself. He acts alone. The ultimate goal is not galactic conquest, but personal wealth and importance. Like a common thug or criminal, he revels in cruelty and selfishness. He preys upon the weak and vulnerable, spreading misery and suffering wherever he goes." Now, the goals and ambitions from each Dark Jedi might vary, such as Baylan Skoll, who is a great example of a Dark Jedi. His aspirations are larger than that of, say, most Dark Jedi, but he doesn't actively follow the Sith Code or the Sith Order, making him a Dark Jedi, as he uses the Force as a tool to aid him in his goals.
Allow me to show you our identification. You're right about one thing, Captain. We are no Jedi.
Also, I want to bring some familiarity to a couple of terms between Dark Jedi and Fallen Jedi. Dark Jedi, a lot of times also known as Fallen Jedi, are Force sensitives and frequently former Jedi that fell to the dark side of the Force. However, the reason why Dark Jedi is the term that's used more is because although many Dark Jedi are formerly Jedi that have fallen to the dark side, Dark Jedi could also just be a dark side user that maybe never was formally trained by a Force user or the Jedi Order and uses the dark side for their own benefit, or they could have even technically been trained by a Sith and then left the Sith because they didn't want that responsibility and that structure. But in any case, Dark Jedi are the selfish of the most selfish. But yeah, basically a fallen Jedi is a Dark Jedi, but not all Dark Jedi are fallen Jedi, if that makes sense. And if a fallen Jedi, say like Anakin Skywalker, he's a fallen Jedi, but he then becomes a Sith after, he obviously is not a Dark Jedi.
Powerful Sith you will become. Henceforth, you shall be known as Darth Vader.
As soon as they follow the ways of the Sith, ends up happening for a lot of Jedi that fall to the dark side. They are no longer a Dark Jedi, they're a Sith if they follow the Sith's teaching. So now let's get into some examples of some Dark Jedi, and the first ever Dark Jedi being Xandor. In the year 24,500-ish BBY, Xandor of the Jedi Order was banished for having a disagreement with them on their views of the Force and the dark side, specifically their dogmatic views of not embracing all aspects of the Force, along with his more dark side tendency to use the fighting style of Taras Kasit, which is a martial arts style and the same style that Darth Maul employed, along with that of Kira. Another reason that contributed to the barrage of Xander from the Jedi Order was his attachment to his lover, Arden Lin, also his right-hand person. Now, if I'm being completely honest here, Xander led a conflict, a large-scale conflict called the First Great Schism, essentially a bunch of dark side users versus the Jedi Order in this prehistoric time. And if the Sith had existed, he probably would have aligned himself with the Sith, if I had to guess, because he had some larger goals at hand. However, this is where another important piece of information comes to mind, and that's that the Sith Order wasn't created till about 5,000 BBY. And that's in a sharp contrast compared to the Jedi Order that is over 25,000 years old BBY. Just meaning the Sith Order is relatively more young compared to that of the Jedi Order. Now, here's where things get really interesting. According to legends, the Sith were actually a species, and their homeworld was a familiar name of the planet Korriban. A former Jedi Master of the Order, who was similarly barred for his more dark side tendencies, will say, ventured off and eventually came upon the planet of Korriban. It was here where he met Force sensitives known as the Sith. They eventually dubbed him as their king, and he ruled over them, and he was proclaimed the first Dark Lord of the Sith, or the Sithari. And this is where Ajunta Pall founded the first Sith Empire and started to expand it onward. Now, this, of course, is according to legends, but even in canon, it's followed similarly that at some point a Dark Jedi was banished from the Jedi Order, ended up on the planet of Korriban around the year 5000 BBY. And this is where the Sith Order was formed. I do like the Legends version with the actual species of Sith that would eventually go extinct, but it would be the Sith Order itself that would keep them living on in their practices of the dark side and the techniques they had learned. But yeah, this is just a little bit of background information of how the Sith came to be, paving the way for some of our favorite Siths, such as Darth Revan, Darth Bane, Darth Plagueis, Darth Xana, and of course Darth Sidious, Darth Vader, Darth Maul. The list goes on. Another slightly confusing note, but something I do need to note, is not all Sith use the title Darth, though most of them did throughout time, but notably the Brotherhood of Darkness, the leader Khan, Dark Lord of the Sith at the time, abolished the use of Darth and the rule of two in informing the Brotherhood of Darkness. Many Sith masters at a time, but nobody used Darth. That is until Bane dubbed himself as Darth Bane and kind of wiped them out. And instituted the rule of two, of course. A master to embody the dark side and an apprentice to crave it. I think it's important for us to understand all aspects of the Force for us to continue discussing Dark Jedi. But now let's get into some more recent examples of some Dark Jedi. Now that you guys should understand the difference between a Sith and a Dark Jedi, or at least the fact that to be a Sith, you're committing to a lot more than just using the dark side of the Force, but you're joining a group, a religion essentially, and committing to a lot more. But a recent example of a Dark Jedi, or a couple of Dark Jedi, would be from the Ahsoka show with Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati, not Sith. And I do think it's kind of exciting of Dave Filoni having their sabers be orange, just kind of show this kind of more middle of the road, a little bit more dark side, but maybe not full Sith, fully devoted to that true evil, just a little bit more, I guess, selfish. I mean, Shin Hati seems a bit more selfish, but still power hungry, which I think to some extent is still natural for a dark side user, even if they're not a Sith. I mean, yeah, they're just great examples because they're literally working as mercenaries for pay, using their Force powers to make money and whatever else to benefit them. Say, such as Asajj Ventress, another Dark Jedi, not a Sith, just essentially a weapon used by Count Dooku throughout the Clone Wars, a good example of a Dark Jedi. Another great example of a Dark Jedi from Visions, Ronin, a very interesting character, not a Sith, but not a Jedi. He's out there just living life, doing his own thing. Marok kind of falls in that similar category of Dark Jedi, similar to Inquisitors. Another good example on the topic of the Clone Wars of a Dark Jedi being a fallen Jedi, Pong Krell, that infamous episode where he forces the clones to fight each other. I think eventually Savage Opress, if Maul and the two brothers succeeded, he would have probably become a Sith, but for the short lifespan that he had, he was no more than a Dark Jedi. Another good one from the Fallen Order series On Dathomir, Cal Kestis meets a dark Jedi of the name Taran Malikos. And even in the sequel trilogy, like the main villains other than Sidious per se, Kylo Ren, a wannabe Sith at best. Another good example from the Darth Bane book, again, Set Harth, a former Jedi that fell to the dark side. This dark Jedi was a good example of a very, selfish one. Now, he was obsessed with Sith artifacts and all that, but he used his powers in the dark side to become rich and bought a mansion and kind of just hung out. Now, he did actually have an encounter with Darth Zana in a duel, and she kind of forced him to become his apprentice, but eventually he managed to escape and fled once again, and apparently learned how to use Force essence transfer and lived for over 1,000 years. Definitely a little bit more of a wild one. Now, before we get to the end here, I do want to just touch on a few other subjects regarding Dark Jedi. You might ask, like, the Inquisitors, are they Dark Jedi or are they Sith? And my answer would be, yeah, Inquisitors fall under that category of Dark Jedi. They're using the dark side of the Force for kind of their own means. Now, their situation is a bit unique because most of the time they don't really have a choice, but they're not true Sith. They don't follow the Sith teaching. They're just a weapon and tool for the Sith. But also, if you remember early on in the video, I basically say anybody that uses the dark side of the Force and doesn't follow the Sith teachings, the Dark Jedi. And well, for the most part, that is true. I think it's just more so important for one to realize that somebody can use the dark side of the Force and not be a Sith. Using the dark side of the Force does not automatically make you a Sith. If you wield a red lightsaber, that doesn't make you a Sith either. And if there's one thing I want you to take away from this video, it's that very fact. If we look at the Rakatan Empire dating back to 30,000 BBY, they utilized the dark side of the Force, and I wouldn't really call them Dark Jedi, even if they were Force sensitive and dark side users per se. Or even the Dathomirian sisters, though, that maybe use more dark side alchemy, not necessarily Sith alchemy all the time. They're not Sith, and maybe they're not Dark Jedi either, but they're certainly not Sith, right? Well, I had a lot of fun making this video for you guys. Hopefully cleared some things up, or at least you maybe learned a couple of things. I learned a couple of things while researching and making this video, so that was a lot of fun. Let me know if you want more videos like this in the future. But yeah, I hope you're having a great holidays, and to a happy new year. May the Force be with you always, whether you're a Jedi, a Dark Jedi, a Sith, or a bounty hunter. I don't know. But remember, one thing to take away from this video, if anything, if you use the dark side and happen to have a red lightsaber, that doesn't automatically make you
A Sith Lord?